Welcome to She Says with your host, Stephanie Regalado. She Says guests share stories from their challenges to successes and, most importantly, the journey of womanhood woven alongside the collaboration of sisterhood. From self, love, friends and family, to hot topics, career, and world views, Stephanie and her guests discuss matters with utmost openness and honesty. So let's hear what she says. Here's Stephanie.
Hello, welcome back to She Says, our 5th episode, which is very exciting. I actually had to pause for a moment to count, which is kind of early. Only 5 to have to pause and count, but that's just...
It's been a long day.
It's just a sign of the times of my life. I'm super excited to have Elise Raimi on with me today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For being here. And we have lots of things that we want to cover in a very short amount of time, but we were both just speaking about how hard it is with heavy hearts to... Oh, I feel myself choking up. Oh, to jump right into those after the school shooting yesterday. And you and I are both moms, and we've just sent our children off to school this morning. So facing this day, it's not a new day. We've all felt this before, but for some reason it's clobbered even harder.
I agree. I felt this one more this time too. I don't know why. There's nothing different in my life really. But yeah, I was saying to you that I'd heard a little bit of the audio recording from the school, and that just knocked me over, sort of thinking about those kids there, thinking about their parents. It sounds so trite that it's hard to even talk about and give it the weight that it deserves, but it's definitely kind of hanging over me today, and you too, I know.
Well, and this morning before I got out of my car, I decided to look through some Facebook. Yesterday I tried to stay away because I didn't feel like I was in a space where I could be pulled in any direction at all. And this morning, very swiftly, I realized that the only space and platform I felt I could step into was one of heartbreak and kind of just interpersonal contemplation and just having my heart go out to those moms and dads and that family. But there's so many people right away rising up with lots of different ways and reasons they feel have contributed to getting us to where we are. And I definitely don't think it's just one, and it's just hard to see all those right now when you're hurting so
It's really
badly.
hard, and I feel like a lot of it is the same conversation for every school shooting, and I understand that it's also fresh because it's new families that are touched by it, and it's new children who are dead from it. But it also, at a certain point, we're beating the same drum and nothing's ever happening. And so are we all going to get up in arms again for the next 3 days and then it's over? That seems like it's been the pattern thus far. And it makes me almost want to not participate at all.
That was part of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with Sandy Hook, I was really in it. I mean, you see little babies, little 5 and 6 year olds. And that had such an impression, and there were so many of them. And I think that's another reason why the numbers, we've become desensitized to it slightly, but it's when the numbers start upticking that really makes the whole world stop.
And for me, it's when I have a 12-year-old son, so he's close in age to the kids that were in that school. And so that's another kind of thinking about my son, who he is an awesome kid, but man, that kid doesn't listen to a direction, and you think about him in a school in this situation where the kids who are going to be okay are the ones who are listening and reacting and thinking about him and what he would do in that situation. I hope it never
and I asked after the Freeman shooting, since it was right here at home, and of course that all got our attentions in a whole new way. And I'd asked my son, Christopher, who's a senior, what he would have done. And he said he would have done the same thing as Sam. And I was like, I don't want you to be the hero.
Right.
Because I want you here.
I want you to come home.
I mean, after you can find some solace in it, but I don't ever want to lose my son. But he's made it loud and clear he's the kind of human, and I know this, that to step up and step in front. And to know that we have kids and we're sending them to school and where that's a risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a bizarre, surreal, horrible.
Or even to have to start weighing the suicides that have been impacting our teenagers, and especially in our community locally, and how hard that hurts facing a gun, the school being shot up the way that it's also happening, to find yourself in any sort of scale, placing things on a scale, which direction you start hoping tragedies weigh a little heavier on this side versus on this side. It's just such a strange space to be in, to realize that you're thinking, wait, I'm comparing what I'd rather hear.
Right.
If we're going to have a tragedy, I'd rather hear
hear X than Y. No,
Yes.
absolutely. And I think, too, I am usually relatively, not with my friends, but on Facebook and stuff like that, I basically steer clear of politics.
Yes.
Because I think I don't know that Facebook is a great forum for it, but I have found myself today, especially, screaming in the car, which I do not do. Since I moved from Boston, I've curbed my yelling in the car and my flicking people off. And just about, for me personally, about this idea that it's not the gun, it's the person. I heard that a bunch from kind of pro-gun lobby people on the radio today. And I mean, obviously there are so many factors, like you said, that contributed to this, but let's look at the ones we can control. We can't control people's mental health. We can help them with their mental health, but you can't control people's actions. To me, gun control, and especially automatic weapons and stuff like that, is a place where there's room for policy and there's room for public input and control. And so I was finding myself surprisingly political this morning in the car.
Well, and I think there's room for action right this second.
Yes.
And I know, and I hate it when people say no more prayers and thoughts. We want action and policy. But we do.
Well, we can have both.
We need we need all of that wrapped in together, but something needs to change. They talk about, the shoe bomber person on airplanes, and now we all have to take off our shoes.
Right.
And how I think really the telltale sign of the health of a society is how the most vulnerable members are treated
and protected.
And that's one thing that kept rising up to me this morning. And all of our Make America Great Again, which we all want to participate in our ways to do that, how things are being incredibly failed, our most vulnerable.
Absolutely. I was wondering, listening
population.
Again to the radio.
Yeah.
Those are high school kids. They're almost adults. I wonder if there aren't some of them who survive this and will come out as spokespeople for.
One thing my son has said that I found very interesting when we talk about his school and things that are happening there and how they're addressing primarily suicide, and that's been the biggest thing, bullying and suicide. And Christopher said, the adults like to talk about it, but adults aren't really comfortable actually hearing how devastating life can be for teenagers.
Yeah.
And we can look and see something different, but they're truly experiencing.
Yeah, and it's so serious
yes.
and intense in their lives, absolutely.
And I thought that was interesting because I value my children the same way I value any adult at any stage in their life. And the things that they say are just as profound, and sometimes even more so because there's a purity to it than what adults are saying. And I really do think we need to lean into our youth and hear from them as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. And your life, usually at the end of my show, I ask if your life was a snow globe and you shook it all up and all those pieces fell back into place. But I was thinking about you and your story, and I wondered, you've had your snow globe shaken up. You've just recently lost your mom fairly suddenly.
Yep.
And so I'm assuming that all those pieces went up in the air. Yeah.
I think it was the most devastating thing that's ever happened to me in my life, which in some ways I feel lucky to get to 40 and have, this not have had anything as tragic happen. But she was diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is a type of aggressive brain cancer, in the beginning of June. And I was in the minivan on the way to Costco, and I had my dad on speakerphone, and my kids were yelling about getting a churro. And my dad sounded weird, and he said, "I'm in the hospital with your mom, and she has a brain tumor." And everything just fell apart from there. I went straight home. They live in North Carolina, where I grew up, and I am so lucky that I got to spend a good part of the last 6 months with her, helping to take care of her. My husband was awesome, and we just kind of made it work so that I could be there partly with the kids, which was kind of a bleep show, and partly by myself, which was just the most treasured time, I think. So she died right after Thanksgiving this year. So it was really quick. 6 months of your mom's absolutely fine. 6 months later, she's dead. Yeah. So,
and your mom was kind of famous. And no one really knew.
In a very bizarre circle of the world.
Well, I will just, when you had posted, I think you'd posted some remembrance or something, not from you, from someone else, about your mom. And then I noticed on Facebook, people started chiming in whoa, wait. This is your mother? Who is your mother?
She, I think, most people identify her as a classical pianist. So she's Welsh by birth, and she went to the Royal Academy of Music, and she always had such a she was so self-conscious that she hadn't gone to college because I'm like, Mom, you went to something called the Royal Academy. I feel like college, like you're okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, she was an absolutely incredible pianist. She played mostly chamber music, and she taught at Duke University, which is where my dad teaches as well. They're both in the music department. And she ended up being there for most of my life, part-time and then full-time, and then she became chair of the department. And she did a lot to help, especially women in the department, and to push kind of more progressive views of music. It's not just old dead white men. We can celebrate all different kinds of music. And so, yeah, she put together interesting programs. She supported people when they needed it. She was a champion for her students and for, especially she did a lot of work with the janitorial staff at Duke. Yeah, most of all, she was a pianist. No, most of all, she was my mom. And she was
the most important person
in
your world. And you said it's shaken up everything. So that's the snow globe part in my life I'm envisioning, because you said you're considering going back to school.
Yeah. Let's see, I used to have a career, and then we moved to Spokane, and I had a baby, and everything has kind of gotten pushed out career-wise for kids, which has been, I mean, sometimes horrible and boring, and you want to rip your hair out, but mostly a really, really awesome almost 12 years, and I'm ready to go back to work. And my old career, which was mostly international, isn't that viable, given that I still want to be here for the kids.
Yeah.
So given all of that, given the incredible nursing care that my mom received and how big of a difference it made, whether your nurse was kind of a bumbling fool or a empathetic, lovely person, and given the fact that I realized that my husband could drop dead 6 months from now. Like that happens. That just happened to me. It's time for a new career. So I'm going to nursing school.
Right here in Spokane.
I think, well, if they'll let me in. I have to do a zillion prereqs because I was a sociology major and I did public health.
And you're a Harvard grad.
I went to Harvard for grad school, So I have a degree in international public health from Harvard. But the community college told me that my credits wouldn't transfer. So I have to go back and take English 101.
I don't even, that's a no comment for me. Okay, I'm being told we need to take a quick little break. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Welcome to Tom Sawyer Country Coffee.
Tom Sawyer Country Coffee only roasts the finest organic coffee for our signature blends. Enjoy a cup at our coffee shop and local businesses and organizations across the region.
I'm Tom Sawyer and we choose the Pacific Northwest.
Last year alone, Avista customers saved over 53 million kilowatt hours of energy. Enough to power more than 4,000 homes for an entire year. Way to save, everyone. Way to save. Find your way to save at avistautilities.com.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
Welcome back to She Says. We have Elise Raimi with us today, and everything's been light and airy here.
We're not talking about death or murder or anything.
No. So to continue on light and airy topics, your international work before you had kiddos was to help, or at least you can help me, the sexual exploitation of refugees.
Yes, to help prevent and address the sexual exploitation of refugees obviously in refugee camps. And then more specifically, there's a surprisingly big problem with sexual exploitation of refugees in refugee camps by aid workers. So I was looking specifically at kind of putting systems of redress and reporting in to make it feasible that somebody with absolutely no power might possibly feel like they could come forward and protect themselves and receive some protection in those situations.
Well, and my question was, obviously, being within that, you have seen a human spectrum of possibility, which I always talk about, like the darkest dark of human possibility to the brightest, the most amazing aspects of them. And just you saying from aid workers as a potential threat. So my question was going to be, what are some of your takeaways from what you know to be true of the human spectrum of possibility, from super dark to most amazing?
I think my biggest takeaway is that I think we have all of it in us. We all have it in us to be callous and horrible and abusive, and we all have it in us to put ourselves entirely to the side and do something to help other people. Some of the offenders that I've worked with have in other ways in their lives been incredible human beings who've done incredible things. And I've worked with a lot of child soldiers as well. And so to see them, that's another place where you really see the spectrum of they were just kids and they were put in this situation and this is who they are 5 years later. You would never expect anybody to come out of that situation any differently. They're currently in some ways posing a lot of danger to a lot of people around them, and in other ways they're kids who got like the shortest end of the stick you can possibly imagine. So I think it all exists in all of us, and we all have to work to remember that, I think, when we're looking at people who we believe are doing bad things, and to try to pull it out of ourselves even when it's hard to stay on the kind of contribution side of things instead of the taking away side.
Well, I was talking to some colleagues earlier today about the effects of trauma on children in particular, because they're going through their brains are developing while at times they're being bathed in the chemicals that are fight or flight and the trauma protection. And I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to throw out all those. I can't even remember what they are. Is cortisol the bad one, or?
I think cortisol is the fight or flight one. I don't know.
Oh, good.
We need Stacey Connor for this. She knows these things.
It's not dopamine. Dopamine is the one that we all chase,
Dopamine's
right?
the good one, yeah.
The good one.
We want that.
Dopamine chasers.
Only in certain forms, of course.
Okay. Yes. But when you think about children, what our conversation was earlier was there are a lot of these interpersonal gurus and self-help and all these people that rise to massive fame, and a lot of them are about addressing things that happened in your life, particularly in your childhood, and letting go of it and making peace with it and moving on. But I think the true element that is missing in some of those discussions is that some of our brains, when we've gone through trauma, have been wired during those periods of trauma.
Absolutely.
So you're not necessarily in this space where, it's just a self-help, or I just need to shift thinking about it this way. You have a different mechanism.
Yeah,
because
your
raised
pathways
within
are going a different way, right? If I am hungry and I don't get food right now, then I'm obviously about to starve. Like when you don't have food for the first
there's
couple years of your life.
socioeconomic. There's food. There's domestic abuse.
Absolutely.
And there's so many different versions of it. And then you have these children that are also ripped away. That you were speaking of, the child soldiers.
Right. You've lost your country. You've lost your family. You've lost everything you might hold dear. And here's a gun, and here's some drugs, and here's a very unstable society. I mean, obviously, there's so much more nuance to it than that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you can come out of that situation. I think some people can heal from that, but I don't think you just pop out of that situation and the war is over and you're
right. And I think
go.
the healing has to look different
Absolutely.
than making conscious decisions or letting go of your past. Or
and I think it's
like
also
True.
sometimes it can saying things like, well, make a conscious decision and meditate on it or
choose
whatever.
Choose joy, choose happiness.
Choose joy, right? But have you eaten today? And do you have a roof over your head? You know, you have to. There's got to be a lot of things already in place for you to be able to take the time to do things like that. So.
Yeah, and I've always been super intrigued with child psychology in particular, and children, because I really feel like that's where our heart is, and the things that we see unveiling that the adults are in our world, in our nation, how the adults are. It's really difficult to change some of that if we're not working on changing how these humans are being created, how all of us are being created, and how we're being raised. And there's just so much infighting in our country in particular, and it feels like we're all at war, and I can't imagine what that's doing to our youth to live in that space and those hearing adults calling each other names.
Right.
And
Absolutely. It's interesting to watch my own kids start to develop their political sensibilities, and they both have very strong opinions that are or are not based in fact, but just to watch them become passionate human beings who speak their mind, it gives me a sliver of hope.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of crap going on, but
I feel the same way too. Well, one of your projects and this is how you and I first came to know each other, is Listen to Your Mother.
Yes.
And I was so excited to hear that you're continuing on, even though the national Listen to Your Mother has decided to not
disband.
to disband.
Well, so there's a national organization founded by a woman named Ann Imig in Madison, and it started as just a show in Madison and spread to, I think it was 41 cities at one point. And Anne has decided to kind of go explore different avenues and do different stuff in her life. So she licensed the rights of Listen to Your Mother to a production company. So it's kind of like the vagina monologue setup. Anyone can kind of rent the script and do it. We obviously aren't running the script. We're just kind of paying for the rights to the name so we can continue it in Spokane. So we're super excited. It's our first year solo. So
how are things looking? Are you still receiving submissions for?
Yes, we have auditions on March 3rd, and we are still getting submissions. We're a little bit low this year. So what I've been telling people is if you aren't sure, you don't think you want to do it, this is a good year to throw your hat in the ring, because obviously the smaller the pool, the better your chances. So
why should someone submit and be a part of the show?
I think the best part about being part of the show is when I ask somebody, what's the story that pops into your head when you think about like the story you would tell? I think everybody has an answer to that, whether they'll ever say it out loud or not. You have the thing that happened, the event, the birth, the death, the whatever it is that has affected you enough that that's in the forefront of your mind. And to be in a supportive environment where you get to work through that story and how to tell that story so that people can hear it. And then to get up on stage, it's just you, which I think to some people sounds scary, but I can almost guarantee you that our cast would say it was empowering to stand up there, to tell their story. The audience is so supportive and lovely. The cast is so supportive of each other. You know, you were in it and you were fantastic. And I hope you felt, you feel connected. You feel connected to the audience, to the cast, to strangers who come up to you afterwards and say, that was my story too, or I would never have the courage to say that, or thank you for sharing that. It's fun.
Well, the most beautiful part about it, I think, because it really, truly supports and solidifies that we all have stories, and they are important to be shared and to be heard. Because when we share those, then we are creating that space for other people to share in authenticity.
Absolutely.
And step in, like you said, and we talk about. This always goes for some reason back to domestic violence for women to me, because I feel like that element of shame that prevents women from truly being able to share with one another their experience, if they're feeling as though they can't stick up for themselves in a situation, or suddenly they're like, because it's a slow release and how you get wound up in these relationships that end up being abusive. But if we could share very raw and real our experiences, I don't know anyone on this planet who wouldn't have a story that they couldn't share that was something maybe they wish they didn't have to admit was part of their life. Yeah,
absolutely. And then you say it out loud. You say the thing you thought you could never say, or the secret you've been holding forever. And I'm not saying this in a flip way. I thought my voice just sounded flip, so I just want to be clear. I think Stacy, my co-producer, and I are so lucky to get to be in the room when people finally give voice to the things that they've been holding on to for so long. It's the biggest gift of the show, and I think it's why we keep doing it. And I think the kind of afterglow of the show, which I really try to hold on to, is for me the reminder that everyone is going through something. It's so easy to forget. So the person who's not doing a good job of parking in front of me, and I want to I obviously have some road rage issues. I want to beep at them or say mean things. Especially over this past 6 months, my mom had just died. If somebody had honked at me while I was trying to park the car, I would have I don't know what I would have done. Put it in park and gotten out and just started sobbing. Just it's once you hear real stories and you hear people being honest about their struggles and their triumphs, it's a beautiful thing to be able to carry that with you into your day and to see a little bit of that in everybody who you come in contact with.
Well, and being part of the cast was such an honor. It had so little to do with my own story that I shared, and so much to do with that coming together and sharing the community of experience with one another.
It's a really fun thing to build that cast, but it wouldn't happen without each person's amazing. I mean, people
Truly.
really do bring their hearts to the show, and if somebody doesn't, then it doesn't quite feel authentic and it doesn't quite jive. So if we can cast so that everybody is actually there with kind of their hearts on their sleeves, that's when we get the best shows.
Well, and you and Stacey do such a brilliant job of weaving the show together with the cast. How many cast members do you have?
10 to 12 usually.
10 to 12 different stories, and you weave them together so the audience is pulled through this entire. You can't just go to one. You'll have an amazing experience just hearing one, but it's that whole experience of being taken through this process of there are deeply emotionally stories that would make you sob. There are stories that make you laugh. There are stories that make you sit back in your seat and contemplate, and stories that make you raise your eyebrows and say, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Or there's such freedom in that. So
and it's always amazing to me. So the only kind of caveats that we put on our auditions are that they're 5 minutes long about, I mean, we're not going to cut you off, but 5 minutes-ish, and that they have something to do with mothering or motherhood.
And it's men and women are able to share.
Literally anyone. The more diversity we can get in our stories, the better. So we really encourage everyone. And the fact that you can put those, just really that one thing out there, motherhood, mothering, and get the entire kind of slew of the human experience is a pretty incredible thing to be a part of. I'm really lucky.
So you're going to nursing school. What is the next big thing, do you think, on the horizon for your life?
Bizarrely. Maybe actually getting into nursing school. That'd be good. If I can pass all my English 101 classes.
I don't know.
I feel a little nervous about it. So nursing school and seeing my kids become teenagers and hopefully kind of keep their heads screwed on, and I hope I can stay close to them as they begin this kind of, I've transitioned to adolescence and adulthood. So I think that's coming up in the next couple of years. Having
teenagers and 18-year-old daughters who are kind of spreading their own wings and flying, my best advice, you didn't ask for it, but is to not take anything personally when your children's heads are spinning. Because sometimes someone told me that when my kids were little, and I was like, sorry, you got the lot you got, but mine are going to be just fine. And then it's not really a head spinning, but there are times when you're just so bewildered. And I notice in particular with my girls, kind of the hurtful, you feel like you're losing them. When my kids used to say, we always complain about the toddler that's walking around talking your ear off nonstop. That doesn't last forever. So if you are able to be open and appreciate that, and even the best of us who are will still struggle with our teenagers when they start holding some things back from us. Or as my daughter said, she has her own private life now, and I shouldn't have air quoted that. She won't watch this show.
Well, she truly actually does have a private life. Like, she's an adult, basically. It's such a... And
I have this beautiful friend, another beautiful friend who lost her 19-month-old daughter Christmas Eve last year. And I have learned so many beautiful things from her in that experience, where she recently was looking at her little baby boy and saying, what a miracle, what I've created, and he's so amazing. And then she realized, he's not mine. And that's another way to look at our children. We have such ownership when they're ours. And I'm feeling this more and more as my son's going to graduate this year. Woo. I just can't even take it, obviously. And I'm so proud of him, and he's in a playoff game tonight for basketball. It's a big deal, but he's not mine. I'm just so darn honored to be able to be alongside them. But particularly with my daughter, I was saying, just not taking it personally, knowing that they're finding their own way in how to have their private life, which we all develop to some degree, healthy humans.
All right, I'm going to call you in a couple of years, and you're going to have to say that to me again.
And I had another great friend who said, if you weren't creating humans that were developing some independent nature, which having a private life is part of being independent, and it doesn't mean anything seedy or something to be worried about. It's a healthy aspect of human growth and development. You want them to succeed and building their platform to take the leap and spread their wings and fly.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
But it's damn tricky.
Yes. And if you're a control freak like me, I feel like it's kind of like, oh, excuse me, can I just fix that for you? You just step aside. I'll take care of it. Yeah. You can't do that anymore. They're their own people.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's just an amazing community around you. You're fabulous. I appreciate most about you. I appreciate that you are 100%. I feel like you're 100% real all of the time. And that made you, maybe you curbed some of that, which is fabulous. But there's enough of you, because we all should polish ourselves a little bit instead of just being wild beings floating through the wind. But that you show enough that you're very real and then relatable.
Oh, thank you. That is really sweet. I feel like that's an important, especially, when I moved to Spokane, I'd never lived in a small town before, and I feel like the urge to kind of create this image is bigger because you are feeling more pushed in by the community.
Yes.
So, yeah, I do try to remember who I am. It's hard sometimes.
Well, they are talking about being cut off and keep it to 5 minutes or cut off. They're giving us the already.
Geez, that did go fast. You were right.
It went super fast. I really adore you. I adore the work that you're doing. I'm rooting for you 100% in motherhood, sisterhood, and I hope you pass those English 101s, although knowing what my children are learning and how I am as a writer, they don't even line up very well.
Oh, no.
I was like, this isn't really real world writing, some of it, but
yeah,
that's just my little secret.
Okay.
Jab. But you can do it. I know you've got this, and
you.
the world will be a luckier place with a caretaker like you in it. So
thanks,
I wish
Stephanie.
you well. Thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Excellent.
She Says is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content.